part of the Press Play Podcast Network.
The 1-1 pitch. A swing and a drive to deep right. Away back. Goal! And with that Hemi call, it is time for another episode of Guardians of the Land MLB podcast, part of the Press Play Podcast Network. I am Mike Vorhies, and alongside me, as always, not the Guardians relief pitcher, Bryan Shaw, but we've got the better Bryan Shaw. Bryan, how are you, good sir?
I'm good. I think the first episode we did, Bryan Shaw wasn't on the roster yet, but he's back.
He's
back for another season with the Guardians. So 2 Bryan Shaws in the land once again, as it should be. But I think a bigger news than Bryan Shaw coming back to the Guardians, it is the Jose Ramirez extension. It was rumored for a couple of weeks, and then it was hot, and then it was cold, and then there was trade rumors everywhere from the Blue Jays and Blue Jays fans trolling Guardians fans on Twitter. And then the Padres were supposedly interested, which, by the way, I'm sure every team in the MLB is interested in Jose Ramirez.
I can't imagine there not being a team that wanted to add a superstar like that to their lineup.
I'm interested in getting a Tesla. Doesn't mean that it's actually going to happen. So, but yes.
I want a Lambo, so I understand what you're saying. But
Jose is locked up for 7 more years, a 5-year extension.
That was the best news of the week. When you sent me the Twitter notification, I rejoiced. I honestly was worried that this wasn't going to get done, but this shows you that the Dolans know what Jose Ramirez means to this team, to this franchise, to this city. They didn't want him to go. And obviously, I think some of those trade rumors were clickbait, as well as agent going, hey, well, then if the Guardians don't want to pony up the dough, I think Toronto or San Diego or fill in the blank will.
I think it was intended to get Twitter in an uproar, which it absolutely did. So I think it worked. It was a way to show that if Jose does leave, the fans would be extremely irritated by it and the kind of backlash they would get to try to get them to meet their demands. But I did believe it was going to get done. I didn't believe a lot of the rumors. I didn't, like I said, where yes, maybe I did believe that the trade rumors of interest were real, because who wouldn't be interested in trading for Jose Ramirez? The intention of the Guardians trading him is a completely different scenario. And I didn't think that they had intentions of trading him. And he has a no trade clause now. Yeah. So he is going to be here for 7 more years, unless, something drastic happens in those last years and, he's getting older and the team's not competing in year 7. And he says, hey, can you guys, send me off to whoever who's got a chance at a World Series this year.
And that's possible. And that's completely great. Jose Ramirez, not the only Guardian to get a payday. Closer Emmanuel Clase agrees to a 5-year, $20 million extension as well. So we've locked up 2 key pieces, Bryan.
That Clase deal is an absolute steal, in my opinion. $4 million a year for the next 5 years. By the way, Jose's extension, he's got $150 million guaranteed for the next 7 years. So I think I had said 6 for 140 and they gave him 7 for 150. So I think I was pretty close. I was using the Javi Baez deal as kind of my benchmark, but still they gave him an extra year.
For all those folks that are saying that the Guardians aren't trying, and that, obviously new name, new everything, and yet nothing really happens leading into spring training, and then spring training's almost over, and they make a few signings, but they're not anything of importance, and everybody's like, oh, this team's not even going to try it. Well, you can shut up now. You've got Jose locked in. You've got your closer locked in. You've got a couple of guys that I have a feeling extensions are coming for them too.
I hope
they're going to wait. They're going to wait, I think. And you had said it with Bieber and Franmil Reyes. Those 2 guys have at least 1, maybe 2 more years of arbitration.
They do. This is their first year of arbitration each.
Right. Yeah. They're not going to rush to sign him to an extension. Jose was going to be a free agent, if I'm not mistaken, at the end of this year. If they
They
didn't
had
work out
a club option for him.
okay.
So he technically had 2 more seasons if they wanted to keep him. But yeah, they wanted to lock him up. So that's part of the extension is they picked up his 2 years of options and then they added 5 more years.
That's awesome.
So that's what they get with that. Yeah, I don't blame fans for still wanting a little bit more. I wanted a little bit more. There were some trades that I was hoping that they were going to make. We found out later that there were some trades that they thought that they had, according to Fox 8 sports anchor and Bally Sports sideline reporter Andre Knott. He was on 92 through the Fan, and he had said that the Guardians thought that they had a deal for Matt Olson and for Winker. Now, I doubt it was both at the same time. I'm sure they thought they had one, and then when that kind of fell through, maybe they moved on to the next one. I'm not as surprised with the Winker interest. I am surprised with the Matt Olson interest because of the amount of money he ended up getting after the fact. Now, the Winker deal fell through because the who was it? Seattle, who got him, ended up taking Suarez as well. And Suarez was making a lot of money. He's not a good hitter, and we don't have a position for him. So the Guardians weren't going to do that. And then when it came to Olson, the Braves offered up their number 1 prospect, and that's what got the deal done for them. And so,
well, and I think in all honesty, Atlanta panicked. They lost Freddie Freeman, or they were going to lose Freddie Freeman. He wasn't going to re-sign with Atlanta. We knew that. So of course, if you want something, you have to sweeten the deal to get it. Seattle tells Cincinnati, hey, we want Winker. And Cincinnati's like, okay, well, if you want Winker, well, then you've got to take Eugenio Suarez and his fat contract too, because we don't want him. And Seattle's like, well, we've got money. Sure. We don't really have a third baseman. We'll take him. Great. That gets the deal done. And I
know some fans are saying, well, so what? They just tried. And then another thing that was said, and this wasn't an ownership thing. This was something that Antonetti said. This was something that Chernoff said. This was something that Tito said, that basically from Tito's standpoint, once those 2 deals fell through, they said, you know what? Let's run it with the young guys. Let's see what we have.
Yeah.
So I think then with the Jose extension, there is intent there to make this team better. And I think right now, for the first half of this season, you're going to see some big league evaluation being done. I think you're going to see some roster adjustment. And then at the trade deadline, they might start to grab some more of those pieces that could be bigger pieces for the years to come. And we are already seeing some of that roster adjustment after the very first game.
Yeah. Yesterday, opening day,
we saw
the news broke.
Steven Kwan played good enough that they were basically like, okay, bye, Bradley Zimmer.
Yeah.
And they traded him.
Bradley Zimmer traded to the Toronto Blue Jays for right-handed reliever Anthony Castro, who will join the team in Kansas City tomorrow. He will be added to the roster since the Guardians can have 28 players up until May 1st. No roster move needs to be made because trading Zimmer opened a spot. Castro takes it. That is going to give the Guardians 15 pitchers, I think.
So let's see. I have Bieber, Savali, Plesac, Quantrill, McKenzie, Eli Morgan, Logan Allen, Emmanuel Clase, Bryan Shaw, Trevor Stephan, Nick Sandlin, Justin Garza, Sam Henches, Connor Pinkleton, and then Anthony Castro. I count 15.
Yeah, that's a lot of pitchers.
and don't forget that James Karinchak is on the injured list right now, so they'll need to make a spot for him when he comes back.
Yep.
Josh Naylor, I guess after the first game, they were saying that he's getting closer and closer to coming back. So there's some reinforcements coming already, but I still think there's a lot to shake out. We saw in the first game, Ahmed Rosario struggled a little bit in left field. There was a communication issue. The wind was really bad yesterday, so I won't blame him too much for that one. But those 2 issues basically led to the 3-1 loss. I think that they were tied at that point, and then that allowed the winning runs to get in.
Well, I think when that error happened, we were actually up 1-0.
Oh, okay.
And that actually allowed the tying run to score. And then, of course, Bobby Witt Jr. put the nail in the coffin later on in the game. But
Yeah.
you know what? We knew that, I'm thankful that we have opening day. I'm glad that it was yesterday. I watched the entire game from start to finish. We knew that the offense was going to be a little bit of an issue, at least for a little bit. This is the Guardians, the Indians have always been a first couple weeks into the season. They kind of stumble getting out of the gate. So that's not really anything new. Plus you add a bunch of these I think we're the youngest team in baseball this year.
Yes.
Our average age. Yeah. And so you've got, Ahmed Rosario, like you said, Brian, he started at shortstop last year, was great. He came to Tito and said, hey, wherever you want to play me, I'm ready to go. They tried him in the outfield. That was an adventure. In center. Obviously we get Miles Straw at the trade deadline last year. He becomes our center fielder. He's cemented in. And then you try Rosario in left. Yeah, it's going to take a little bit of time. The error yesterday should have never happened, but you got to remember spring training started late because of the lockout, and we're jumping right into the season. So with starting pitchers, with defense, offense, these guys aren't quite ready yet, in my opinion. You saw yesterday Bieber threw 70 pitches. That was his limit. And then Tristan McKenzie, who's our fifth starter, who wasn't going to get the start until Monday when the Guardians play the Reds, he piggybacked off of Bieber, and he looked really good for a while. And then all of a sudden in my opinion, I know I text you this, Brian, but I think that Tito left McKenzie in a little too long. I would have I'd have given him 2 innings and then I'd have moved on, just because, guys start to figure out pitches. And we've noticed with McKenzie, it's kind of been up and down, up and down, up and down. But
yeah. And I'd like to point out that the Guardians actually did out-hit the Royals yesterday. It's just that the Royals were able to string a couple together, and that's been a struggle. I want to kind of circle back to Stephen Kwan, who had a great debut. The big thing about him in his scouting reports were that he had amazing plate discipline. He makes the team. He starts in the first game. He didn't strike out all of spring training, and he goes into the first game as a major leaguer and gets a hit and 2 walks.
I'll take that every day.
Incredible for a first game for a guy in his rookie year. I mean,
a stat that I heard during the game yesterday that Matt Underwood and Rick Manning were talking about on the broadcast for Bally Sports is that Stephen Kwan had the lowest strikeout percentage in all of minor league baseball at 9%.
That's amazing.
From AA to AAA, 9%. He's got amazing plate discipline, and this guy's a rookie. We saw it yesterday. I couldn't believe it. 2 walks. You said it too. He got the hit later in the game. So shout out to, Stephen Kwan. We tagged him on Twitter, letting him know, congrats. That's a huge ordeal. You get your hit. Now the monkey's off your back. Now you can kind of go and have fun and start every game in right field, because now that Zimmer's gone, you get your wish, Brian. We don't get a Zimmer, Straw, and Mercado defense. We saw Mercado come in yesterday as a defensive replacement, but and I'm fine with that because he's really good on defense. He just can't hit water if he fell out of a boat in the middle of the ocean. So I get it. I agree with what you said. I think there's going to be some moves coming soon with, when Karinchak gets healthy, when Naylor's actually played in 2 of the 3 AAA games for Columbus. And I think he's already got 3 hits.
Yeah. Naylor coming back will be huge. I will be curious to see if he actually does play in the outfield or if they put him at a different position. That position being first base, because I think that is another short leash spot on the roster.
The error yesterday didn't help Bobby Bradley at all. It was a routine ground ball. I don't know what he was thinking, how he misplayed that ball. I don't know if it took a nasty hop, what it did, but I yelled out in frustration. I'm like, this is not helping your chances, Bobby. It's really not. Like, you've got a chance to be this guy that everybody thinks you can be. You've got power for days. Your plate discipline isn't very good, and your defense has been questioned quite a bit. And what happened yesterday? He was lifted for a pinch hitter when the game was on the line, like when it mattered.
Right.
They pinch hit, and Owen Miller goes up.
So it was what, first and third, 2 outs?
Yeah.
Yeah. And they yanked him and put Owen Miller in. They had a chance there. And they just couldn't capitalize. Owen Miller and Ernie Clement had been hitting really well in the spring. I think they were both batting over 400 in the spring. Bobby Bradley was hitting in the twos. So he's another one of those guys that I think there's going to be some interesting lineup configurations over the course of the next few weeks as they figure this out, because there's quite a few guys that can kind of play all over the field, whether it's Josh Naylor playing right field or first base, whether it's Owen Miller playing second or first, Ernie Clement plays all the infield spots, Ahmed Rosario playing left field or short, Andreas Jimenez playing short or second. Like, there's so many different configurations that they can make to try to figure out which one's going to be the best, and to start helping weed out some of those guys that you just don't think are going to continue on. And then when that does happen, you start packaging some of these guys, and you upgrade some other spots that you feel like you're coming short on.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more. Couldn't agree more, Brian. Well, let's take a break. When we come back, I want to dive into this team a little bit. I want to talk about some weak spots that I think the Guardians are going to have that are glaring. If they don't fix them quick, we could be in for a long season. We'll talk about that when we come right back.
Hey everybody, it's Sam Amico from Cavs on the Break NBA podcast. Be sure to give us a listen for all your Cleveland Cavaliers recaps, analysis, breakdowns, draft talk, free agency. The list goes on and on. Give us a listen, Cavs on the Break NBA podcast.
For the Dennis Maniloff Show, I'll tap into my 40-plus years of following Cleveland sports and 30-plus years of writing and talking about them, so as to bring you informed opinions and analysis of your favorite players and teams. I also will monitor the national sports scene and, when warranted, step out of the toy department and into the real world. And I'll always be on the lookout for special guests. By all means, join us.
Looking for new insights on the Cleveland sports scene with a unique side of Cleveland sports history? Then you found the perfect podcast. I'm John Sable.
And I'm Scott Sable, and we're hosts of the Sable Brothers on the Baseline podcast, a podcast about Cleveland sports, but not your typical podcast about the land's sports teams. Join us as we embark on a journey of sharing a unique and historical side of Cleveland sports history with the help of some former Cleveland sports stars and other historical figures.
All right here on the Sable Brothers on the Baseline podcast, part of the Press Play Podcast Network.
And we are back to Guardians of the Land MLB podcast. I am Mike Vorhies with the man, Bryan Shaw. Brian, before we went to break, I want to kind of break this team down a little bit now that we're back here. Opening day yesterday, obviously the loss. The glaring hole that I think this team is going to have is the bullpen. And I think that may be my fault because of last year with the injuries and losing all 5 of our starting pitchers at once at some point during the season. I think we have one of the best starting rotations in baseball as long as these guys are healthy. But that bullpen, to me, we saw cracks in the foundation last year. I don't think we really did anything to upgrade the bullpen. You've got Karinchak, who's already injured. What do you think? We saw guys like Henches and Morgan. We've got Connor Pilkington, who we got from the White Sox for Cesar Hernandez last year. What are your thoughts on some of these young guys? Do you think that I'm kind of looking into it a little too much, or do you think that there's reason for concern?
I think there's reason for concern because we have no idea what this bullpen can really be outside of Clase and Shaw. I don't even think we know what we have in Karinchak, because we haven't seen him come back yet since sticky stuff and him falling off at the end of last year. Now, on that note, comparing it to last year, Eli Morgan was making starts. Logan Allen was making starts. Sam Henches was making starts. And those guys are now in the bullpen. They're going to be relievers. they very much struggled as starters, but I wonder if they in 1-2 inning situations, if they will do much, much better. So I think that's for Tito to figure out. It's a huge question mark. I will give you that. I don't know if it's necessarily a weakness yet, because I just don't think that we know.
I'd agree. And you forgot to Nick Sandlin coming off of a major injury. He's back in the bullpen, so we don't know what we have with Nick. You've got the left-hander who throws 100 miles an hour, former outfielder. And I'm going to butcher his last name because I don't know how it's pronounced.
I think it's Goes.
Is it Ghost? Okay, so Anthony Ghost, he came on the scene after call-ups last year, and he looked great. So where does he kind of fall into this bullpen? You've got Trevor Stephan, who we picked up from the Yankees.
He was a Rule 5 pick last year. Yep.
Right.
So he had to stay on the team.
Right. And he was kind of up and down. You had, you talked about Mr. Reliable, your likeness, Bryan Shaw. He was used 81 times last year.
Yeah, I don't think they can do that again. Like, I'd like to see that maybe down into the 50s and 60s, because that does mean that you're overusing a guy. I just think with the bullpen was taxed last year. Let's not forget Bieber missed half the season. Let's not forget that Aaron Savali sprained his finger and missed 2 months.
No, that was finger was Plesac.
Plesac broke his thumb.
That's
in a rage.
Okay. Yes.
Ripping his shirt off. And he also missed 2 months. So you lost your top 3 starters. And then, you were putting Logan Allen in and all those guys and JC Mejia. And those guys were getting starts when they shouldn't have been getting starts. They weren't ready.
Right.
And somehow with all that, they still won 80 games last year.
Yeah.
So if they can stay healthy, also Fran Mill missed a lot of time. He strained his oblique last year. I think he missed like 6 weeks.
Yep.
So that's the one thing that makes me hope that the bullpen won't be like last year, because hopefully it doesn't get overworked. And then hopefully there's going to be guys that they might be in better situations to where they can perform. Like a lot of those guys that were starting last year that shouldn't have been, but maybe in a 1-2 inning situation, their skills can flourish.
Right. And I know Henches did pretty well when they used him in that role where he would come in and pitch an inning or pitch, 2 innings, and he would do great. So maybe these guys aren't starters, maybe they're relievers, and that'll be something that we get to watch. Another, I think, glaring issue is the anemic offense. I'm wondering where all the runs are going to come from when I look at who's on this roster. Like catcher, Austin Hedges is probably one of the greatest defensive catchers in baseball. What did he hit last year?
Under 200,
$189, something crazy. And he showed it yesterday where he couldn't get a hit when it mattered. What did we do in the offseason? Did we address that with a catcher? Not really. We signed Luke Maley as our backup. We had Sandy Leone in camp as well, former Indian. He asked for his release when he found out he wasn't going to make the team. And then Maley blows his hamstring running first to third on a hit in spring training, and now he's on the injured list. Is he much of an upgrade over Hedges?
Maley? No.
Yeah, no.
And he's not. And Hedges is going to be the starter. The Guardians obviously value defense there. They do not. They feel like the trade-off of, we'll call it runs saved versus runs produced, is something that they want, that they value. Tito reinforced that sometime last week. He had mentioned it to where it's a defensive position, and that's what they value in that spot. In terms of offense, you have to start to see guys step up. You, after the fifth hitter, whether, with your is Josh Naylor going to step up? Is Bobby Bradley going to step up? Can Andreas Jimenez hit like he did in the spring, or not in the spring, excuse me, in AAA last year? Let's not forget though, when Jimenez did go back to AAA last year, when they sent him down and put Ahmed at short, that was Jimenez's first time in AAA. When he made his big league debut with the Mets, he had only been in AA. So he skipped over AAA. And so, is he going to hit? Are you going to get regular at bats for Owen Miller or Ernie Clement? And are they going to hit? There's all these question marks. Can Mercado, with his 20 pounds of weight that he put on, does he now have some power, and can he make contact? There's so many, well, what if,
Mm-hmm.
and that goes back to, you have to start to sort this out. And if the guys that aren't hitting, if Bobby Bradley is still going to be a strikeout machine, then it's probably time to move on from him. And put somebody else there that can produce. I think it's obviously only one game, but we saw the spring. We know the scouting report. I think Stephen Kwan's going to be the real deal. And that could be a huge boost.
I'm leaning that way. If he can start 4 out of 5 games in a row, because obviously you're going to need days off here and there. If he can do what he did, where he's getting on base, I'm all for it. I want to see this guy run. Can he steal bases? Like, that's what I'm excited for.
The comp I heard or read was Michael Brantley style plate discipline, which we saw, we witnessed. Maybe not as much power as Brantley, but also a better outfielder than Brantley.
Yeah. Okay. I'm excited. I mean, there's one other guy that I'm really excited to see, and he's currently in AAA. And that's Gabriel Arias. He had an amazing spring. I honestly thought he had done enough to make the team, but they want him to get regular at bats, because let's not forget that Andres Jimenez was the key piece when we traded Francisco Lindor to the Mets. The Guardians, the Indians, they wanted Jimenez a part of that deal, and they want to see what they have. Rosario was just kind of like the icing on the cake in that trade. He played very well.
And he hit like 280 last year.
Right.
Which was better than Lindor.
Right. I'm excited. If you can have Rosario play left field and play it well, and you can have Naylor chime in where he needs to, maybe at first base if Bobby is going to struggle. I want to know when we get to see the shortstop of the future, Gabriel Arias, because we saw what he can do in spring. He's incredible. I want to see if he can produce at the major league level. Yeah,
I have to wonder if. So I had given Bradley Zimmer 2 weeks, because I said the Josh Naylor injury. He was on the injured list for 10 days. So I was like, okay, basically Bradley Zimmer has 2 weeks to prove that he can play. He didn't even get that. He got a day and he was gone.
Well, he didn't play. He didn't play yesterday, and I had a feeling something might be up.
Yeah.
The fact that he didn't even play. We know that he can run.
Yeah.
We know that he's great on defense. And the fact that the Guardians didn't sub him in, I'm like, that's odd. Zimmer's not in. Okay. Well, maybe there's something we don't know. And after the game, an hour after the game, news broke of the trade, and Zimmer's going to go to Toronto, where they're already loaded in the outfield. So I don't even know where he's going to play there either.
Yeah. But where I'm going with that is now I think Bobby Bradley basically has a couple of weeks for when Josh Naylor does come back, because and then especially with the impending call up of Gabriel Arias, because do you have an infield of Owen Miller, Gabriel Arias at second, or excuse me, Jimenez at second, Arias at short, Jose at third, or is it Naylor, Jimenez, Arias, Jose? Like, either way, Bobby Bradley doesn't quite fit into that equation. Mm-hmm. And you are then adding another middle infielder to already a crowded middle infield when Arias is called up. And I think that's going to happen sooner rather than later, because I think he could really bring some excitement to the team when he's called up.
Yep. He is definitely a name to watch. What I would like to see the Guardians do, Brian, just a little bit, is we know that Yu Chang hits lefties very well. We know that Jimenez hits righties very well. I have a feeling we're going to see a platoon at second base with them. You're going to see Rosario play a little short. You're going to see him play left. You're going to see Owen Miller kind of come off the bench and spell whomever at first base. And then Superman, Ernie Clement, who plays all over the diamond and absolutely knocked the cover off the ball in spring, We haven't even seen him yet. So a lot of question marks, a lot of what ifs, a lot of excitement, I think, can be given to this Guardians team. Yes, they lost yesterday. Okay. No team's ever gone 162-0.
There's a lot more games, and if we're gonna
Right.
freak out on Twitter after every loss, then you're gonna have 70 to 90 very bad days.
Right. Exactly.
And the Chernoff, Antonetti, Tito, like they've gone on tour basically when it comes to talking to the media, and have talked about their desire to get these young guys on the field, what that they think that they have in them, that they want to evaluate them. They had laid hints. They didn't say that they went after certain guys, but they said when they're targeted guys that they didn't get, they decided to move on and didn't want to sign anybody for the sake of signing anyone. Now, there was a trade that went through, and I was really annoyed that they didn't make it.
I think we both were. It snuck under the radar that you told me about it. I didn't even know what happened.
Yeah, it seemed like it would be something that would be in their wheelhouse. And I'm just surprised that they didn't go after Austin Meadows, especially because of what the return was of just Isaac Paredes.
Yep.
And Meadows only makes $4 million this year in arbitration and has 2 more years of arbitration. So he's basically in the same spot control wise as Bieber and Franmil.
Mm-hmm.
Guy's a former All-Star.
He is.
Like, I just couldn't believe that they weren't in on that deal, because that one's like perfectly in their wheelhouse of the moves they make.
And here's what I thought, and I heard this take on at the MLB Network when they were talking about the trade and why Cleveland didn't get in on it. I honestly think Austin Meadows is trending in a downward direction. And we had a player very similar to him in Bradley Zimmer. They're very similar in playing style. So I think that's why the Guardians didn't pull that trade. It kind of didn't make sense that we didn't attempt, because we have a surplus of infielders that we could have, gladly given somebody to get a player like Meadows, but you don't know what you're going to get with Meadows. Now he goes to Detroit. We're going to see him in the division a lot. We're going to play against him. I'm interested to see in a couple months if I'm still thinking the same thing.
Yeah. And maybe that one snuck past them because they were focused on Jose.
Maybe.
And because it happened at about the same time. I would hope that the front office could handle 2 conversations at once when it comes to trades and things. But I don't know. I some of the other deals that ended up happening, some of the other free agent signings that ended up happening, I completely understood why they didn't make them, because before the Jose trade, or before the Jose extension, excuse me, the biggest contract that they had ever given out was Edwin's 3 years, $60 million, so $20 million a year. And then let's not forget, then they did trade it away the last year of that contract to get Carlos Santana back.
Mm-hmm.
So some of those deals that were pretty big, the Chris Bryant 7 for 180, Castellanos 5 for 100, and one that did make sense, and we can talk about this too because it was interesting. Jock Peterson got one for $6 million, and then he goes on Twitter, and I don't think that was specifically directed at the Guardians, but it was directed at just the other payrolls of being the low payrolls, and he said that I feel bad for you as fans. So to me, that sounded like sour grapes. You literally just had a CBA, and if that was a problem for you, why wasn't it addressed then?
I'm excited. Jock Peterson signed with the Giants, and guess who the Guardians home opener is against? Oh, the Giants. Jock Peterson gets to come to town. You know what, City of Cleveland, we're going to let him know how we feel about him, because I honestly think that when he was complaining on Twitter is that he was coming after the Guardians.
Because there was interest.
I don't think he cares about the Baltimore Orioles. I don't think he cares about the Pirates, the other teams that have low payroll. He was taking a shot at Cleveland. So guess what? And you and I've talked about this, and I've talked about it with Brent. I've talked about it with a bunch of people. What does a $280 million payroll get you? Does it automatically buy you a World Series? No.
Well, we had a better record than the Padres last year.
Exactly. A payroll you know what? The Guardians have always been contenders. They've always been in it every season. They're always competitive. It's not like they're phoning it in and they don't care anymore.
Yeah, that's the thing. They haven't been in the bottom. Cleveland hasn't actually seen bad baseball since Maniacta.
Right.
In 2012, when they went 68 and 94.
Right.
They have been, last year was the first year that they were under 500 under Tito, and they were 80 and 82 and
Right.
they were basically 500. And that was with all the issues of last year.
Right.
But people are acting like they're the Browns and they're tanking and going 1-31, which is completely not the case.
No,
but there is this weird different standard when it comes to these teams. Like the Cavaliers after LeBron definitely bottomed out.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, they took some heat for it, but the Guardians are obviously in a retool. They have all these young players. They're going through this grind, but they've been able to do it without having to bottom out. We haven't had to watch a 50-win team or, you know, a 60-win team.
Right.
They've been competitive.
We're not in Baltimore. We're not in Pittsburgh. We're not watching these teams that just kind of throw whatever they can out on the field. The Guardians last year, as the Indians did everything they could with all these injuries. There was a point, I remember having you on as a guest last year, where they were actually 11 games above 500, and we couldn't believe it.
Yeah. And
that was with injuries. So guys, this team's going to be competitive. There's no doubt in my mind. It's injuries. We got destroyed.
Let me recap this again for people of what we saw. Sam Hentges started 12 games last year and had a 6.6 ERA. JC Mejia had 11 starts last year, had an 8.2 ERA. Logan Allen had 11 starts last year and had a 6.2 ERA. Eli Morgan had 18 starts last year and had a 5.3 ERA. Tristan McKenzie had 9 losses. Nick Whitgren had 9 losses. JC Mejia had 7. Logan Allen had 7. Eli Morgan had 7. Hentges had 4. So that's 18, 25, 32, 39. That's 43 losses right there.
Yeah.
Now,
and those are guys that don't have the major league experience that we're used to, minus Nick Whitgren. But we kind of noticed with Nick Whitgren, he kind of fell off the planet. I wish him all the luck in St. Louis. I think he pitched yesterday. He did a great job, but they can have him. I want to see what we've got now.
And then also to add to that, Tristan McKenzie and Cal Quantrill didn't have good starts. Tristan McKenzie's ERA in June was 7.5. Quantrill's ERA in June was 7.2. But then in the second half of the season, McKenzie had a 1.93 ERA in August. Quantrill had a 2.8 in July, a 1.4 in August, and a 2.73 in September.
You know what, guys? The future's bright. That's all I got to say. If we can stay healthy. Now, Brian, what I want to do before we wrap it up, we do this every year. It is our 2022 predictions. Okay. Last year, the Indians went 80 and 82 with all the injuries, 2 games under 500. I'm going on record right now. The Cleveland Guardians for 2022 will finish 88 and 74. Third place in the division, but unfortunately no playoffs.
They missed the wild card. Okay.
That is my prediction. I think Shane Bieber has a phenomenal season. I think Stephen Kwan's the real deal, like you said. And I think Gabriel Arias will be on this roster before June 1st.
So this year reminds me a lot of 2015, the year before they went to the World Series. I'm not saying they're going to the World Series next year. I'm just talking about in terms of like evaluation and figuring guys out. At that time, Jose was a utility player. Lindor got called up that year. I
went to Chicago to see the Francisco Lindor
did you?
At
Nice.
Wrigley. Yes, I had followed Frankie since we got him, and I was over the moon excited to see him play. But you know, I'm not going to cry over sour grapes. I still think he's a great ball player, but it's not all about the money. But anyway, Continue.
So it makes me think of that year. What I think is going to happen is if they're about 500 or a little bit better, I think they're going to make some deals at the deadline that not just help for this year, but help in future years, as they've always done. A lot of the deal for Clevenger netted them Josh Naylor, Owen Miller, Gabriel Arias, Cal Quantrill. Like just an insane trade.
Just that is unbelievable, that return.
So I think, you'll see some packaging now instead of guys that are on expiring contracts that are going to get moved for younger guys. I think we're going to go the other way. We're going to take some of these guys, package them together, and get those missing pieces that they figure out that they have. I'm going to go with about 84 or 85 wins. I think that similar to you, I think they'll just be slightly better than 500. I think they'll maybe be in the wild card hunt towards the end of the season, but probably fall short this year. And then I think next year, as they continue to supplement this roster and these young guys come up and get some experience and we figure out who is who, then next year is going to be a big year for them.
No, I'm excited, man. Let's go. Guardians base. I almost said it. I caught myself. Guardians baseball is here. The next game is on Saturday, 3:30 in Kansas City. Zach Plesac gets the start. I'm over the moon, man. I can't believe we're finally talking baseball. The games count. It counts. And we're going to bring you all the Guardians information this year. Bryan, as always, thank you for your insight, man. I love it. I'm so excited to see what this season brings.
Yeah, I think it's going to be exciting either way. I don't think it's going to be boring. By no means. There's going to be a lot of moving pieces and parts. It's going to be fun to cover. It's going to be fun to watch and follow. If you miss some games, make sure you check us out. We'll be here every 2 weeks, unless something big happens. If there's a big move, then we'll do an emergency podcast and we'll talk about it. And we'll talk about the impacts.
Absolutely. And here's a little teaser, folks. There may or may not be a live episode for Guardians of the Land MLB podcast coming very soon to a bar and grill near you.
So if you want to come harass us and tell us that our takes are stupid, then that's your opportunity to come out.
Watch our Twitter feed at GOT. No, it's GO Land. What is our Twitter handle, Bryan? What am I doing? I almost said our old one. I don't know what in the world I'm doing. My goodness.
You can find me at Weathershaw, WXSHAW. Yours is at Mike Vorhies. We are just Guardians Land.
That's what it is. Guardians Land.
Very simple.
I don't know what I was thinking. I'm in left center field today. Remember, the hashtag for this year is hashtag for the land. If you're going to tweet anything Guardians, make sure you add hashtag for the land. Bryan, until we meet again, man, I'm super excited to do this with you. Let's go Guardians, man. Let's defend the land. Let's get some wins. Let's see what this team can do.
Awesome. Good talking to you, and we'll do it again in a couple weeks.
Sounds like a plan. Have a good one, everybody.
Part of the Press Play Podcast Network.